I brought along my son Jonathan, who in the year 2001 will be the same age as I am now. Maybe he will be better adjusted to this kind of world that you're trying to portray.
The big difference when he grows up, in fact, if we wanted to wait for the year 2001, is that he will have in his own house, not a computer as big as this, but at least a console through which he can talk to his friendly local computer and get all the information he needs for his everyday life, like his bank statements, his theatre reservations, all the information you need in the course of living in a complex modern society. This will be in a compact form in his own house. He'll have a television screen like these here and a keyboard, and he'll talk to the computer, get information from it, and he'll take it as much for granted as we take the telephone.
I wonder though, what sort of a life would it be like in social terms? If our whole life is built around the computer, we become a computer-dependent society and computer-independent individuals.
In some ways, but they'll also enrich our society because it'll make it possible for us to live really anywhere we like. Any businessman, any executive could live almost anywhere on Earth and still do his business through a device like this. And this is a wonderful thing. It means we wanted to be stuck in cities, we better live out in the country or wherever we please and still carry on complete interaction with human beings as well as with other computers.
Since the 1970s, technologists have dreamed of a networked world where identity, information, commerce, and ownership are renegotiated away from centralized power. From the capitalist's personal computer to grassroots socialists and cypherpunks, these are developers, designers, organizers, entrepreneurs, early adopters. Their politics are diverse, yet they have areas of consensus, because it's a movement that rallies around the values of self-expression, data resilience, interoperability. But this movement is stuck in a loop, an innovation and collapse cycle from which it cannot escape. The loop's crescendo is cruel, destroying lives and shattering collectives, whilst reinforcing power before receding into history, leaving behind a wake of unintended consequences that echo into the future. This loop has repeated every decade since 1990. It repeats itself because those caught inside the loop are unable to see that it even exists. And because of this, the fundamental vulnerabilities of network systems are ignored. Today, we are caught in the fourth loop. And right now, we're at its crest. The loop begins as two techno-libertarian ideologies come of age in the early 1990s. Both share a dream of a cyber frontier, but they differ in how they see the world. The Californian ideologists saw the world as a series of systems and embraced an almost religious compulsion to live as much as possible in the electronic world. They declared cyberspace as independent of governance and sought to mesh the digital and physical worlds together, but on their own terms. At the same time, a cryptographer named Phil Zimmermann saw the world differently. To him, the open designs of a networked world and digital identity both invoked paranoia. In 1993, Zimmermann released PGP, a resilient public key encryption for anyone to use. It was a game changer because it reshuffled power with computer code, and the American government sought to prosecute him in retaliation. The first loop set the terms for how power would respond to decentralization. When challenged, it would respond with full force and leave nothing to chance. The Californians spread their ideology worldwide, and Phil Zimmermann won the encryption war. But techno-utopianism was in full force. And so as the Californian ideology accelerated into the mainstream, the lessons learned by Zimmermann were lost.
Somebody's uploading a song from my hard drive. They're stealing one of my MP3s. What do you think of that, Mr. Rob?
It's very amazing, Trev. Beautiful.
Crazy, crazy stuff.
He goes to Napster.com to get all the music he wants, and he doesn't pay for it.
The second loop starts when Sean Fanning and Sean Parker released Napster, a rudimentary peer-to-peer file sharing system. It comes at a time of media consolidation, and for the first time, it put distribution in the hands of everyone. It's a direct threat to a cultural economic order that had risen from the Second World War.
Hey, come look at the site.
Oh, cool. Can you download the Foo Fighters?
Yeah. Hold on. What did I do?
You know it's illegal, download copyrighted music. I'm taking you in.
Pay for music, never legally download.
Was swift, and Fanning and Parker were sued into oblivion by a conglomerate of music and motion picture studios from both sides of the Atlantic. It would take less than 18 months for Napster to launch and shut down, but the pair would be immortalized in digital culture forever. Because a Pandora's box had been opened. This would be the end of the capitalist cultural order. With the help of a new protocol called BitTorrent, small groups such as the Swedish Pirate Party Collective set up and maintained some of the most popular public file sharing networks in the world. These groups learnt from Napster and separated the protocol from the application itself. And in doing so, they could not be stopped by simply targeting the reformists. So, the conglomerate went after everyone. It was a brutal strategy in which corporations, with the assistance of governments, went after children, grandparents, unemployed single mothers, college professors, random selections from the millions of peer-to-peer users worldwide. Looking back, it's difficult to see just how close the copyright reformers got to dismantling the existing cultural order. The protocol promised liberation, a new form of post-digital scarcity, but inside lurked a danger that was invisible to all but the most technically literate. By the end of the loop, the protocol had been pressed into the service of corporate giants. Today, the cultural conglomerates are amongst the richest companies in the world.
Because I'm missing out on all these wonderful conversations we don't have. Why? Because I'm preparing dinner and nobody's in the kitchen with me.
We're down by between 3 and 4.5% generally across these markets. What in the world is happening on Wall Street?
Two-year note yields went from 190 to 166 in the blink of an eye.
On the NASDAQ, everything and more has been completely...
The third loop comes a year after the global financial crisis. in the form of a white paper and network released by an anonymous cryptographer. This system, Bitcoin, has an article about the financial crisis written to its first blocks, and this is interpreted to be a protest against the existing financial system. Described as a decentralized and censorship-resistant financial system, the network explodes, with hundreds of thousands of early adopters joining to transact and build businesses in this new opportunity. Bitcoin transactions are considered anonymous, and so dozens of dark web marketplaces open, selling restricted or illegal items. But this was a mistake, because Bitcoin transactions are not anonymous. Instead, they exist on a publicly accessible ledger and are forensically admissible as evidence. Like the previous two loops, this was a decentralized system that threatened incumbent power, and so as police forces mobilized, they went after everyone. For some, the outcomes were staggering, like life prison sentences. Bitcoin proved that the financial networks were lagging behind, and as a result, as the cryptocurrency faded from public use, what we got in its place were fintech startups and democratized day trading.
I remember reading an article when I was about 12 years old, I think it might have been in Scientific American, where they measured the efficiency of locomotion for all these species on planet Earth. How many kilocalories did they expend to get from point A to point B? And the condor won, came in at the top of the list, surpassed everything else, and humans came in about a third of the way down the list, which was not such a great showing for the crown of creation. And but somebody there had the imagination to test the efficiency of a human riding a bicycle. Human riding a bicycle blew away the condor, all the way off the top of the list. And it made a really big impression on me that we humans are tool builders, and that we can fashion tools that amplify these inherent abilities that we have to spectacular magnitudes. And so for me, a computer has always been a bicycle of the mind, something that takes us far beyond our inherent abilities. And I think we're just at the early stages of this tool, very early stages. And we've come only a very short distance, and it's still in its formation, but already we've seen enormous changes. I think that's nothing compared to what's coming in the next 100 years.
Hey, thank you to our networks. I'm sorry that we've just like stopped this halfway through. If you were here for my earlier talk, you would have seen that we had an issue and my talk got pushed back by half an hour. So this is the first part of a video essay version of the new piece of work that I produced for New Design Congress called This is Fine, Optimism and Emergency in a Decentralized Network. And I just wanted to run through the end of that. I had a technical difficulty in which I couldn't get the final version of this to people, to the organizers. And so having this awkward thing is, I guess, the best way to reflect upon the final loop and what some of the what some of the learnings of that are. My name is Cade, and I'm the founder of the New Design Congress. And before that, I worked at Signal. I worked on prototyping Signal, and I also worked on a number of other projects in digital security, both in America and Europe. And so I'm a little bit unprepared, and I'm sorry about that. But what I want to do now is switch things over and run through a couple of the last parts of this small video documentary that I put together. The other thing I just wanted to quickly say, the New Design Congress itself is a research group that's dedicated to understanding the role of technology as a socio-political and economic accelerant, taking the existing things in the world and kind of mashing them together. And the essay before looks at the role of the essay version of this talk, of this video documentary, if you like, looks into the history of how we came to be with the issues that we have. And so the fourth loop, obviously, is the loop today. And it sort of looks at the ways in which things have come together, both externally to decentralized platforms and internally to them. So all of the debt that has been, all of the debt that's due to be paid off or that's accumulated is kind of coming at the same time as a number of external problems around the world, be it the climate or authoritarianism, things like that. And so in the text essay, I talk a lot about the role of some of the misconceptions of decentralization that have persisted throughout the years, and how they then actually threaten this in a way that is far more insidious or far more dangerous, because it has a much further reach than the previous incarnations of the loop. And so I just want to quickly reflect upon some of these and talk a little bit about how what we're sort of seeing today. So in the previous loops, in each case, there's a misconception that the technology stack that challenges a incumbent power has the ability to be resilient. And that's true in a lot of cases. For example, data resilience is pretty great. The censorship resistance of certain protocols is also very, very well documented. But what's missing from a lot of our work is these understandings of some of the ways in which our technology stacks, decentralized technology stacks, are attacked over and over again. So in this case, for example, we look at things like DAT and secure scuttlebutt, etc. What we see is extremely resilient new networks that also are not resilient when it comes to the politics, because much like the loops that came before us, the cryptocurrency loop, the BitTorrent loop, and so on, the newer emerging decentralization still lacks a greater understanding of its role as a political accelerant. And in particular, it still makes the case that it's still designed, all of it designed from a perspective of relative optimism at a time when it shouldn't. So for example, in 2018, the DAT Foundation spoke publicly of a desire to build a decentralized, censorship-resistant Wikipedia. But of course, that was impossible because DAT is not private. You could build something that is censorship resistant, but censorship resistance itself is not the only thing that you need. You also need, censorship resistance is two parts. One is the act of delivering information. The second is actually avoiding detection of receiving that information. Because if you're detected receiving that information, that's the social part of censorship. Similarly, that had an issue with a protester uploading tons and thousands of US immigration and custom enforcement officers' personal information. It was originally posted to GitHub, and then Microsoft's lawyers intervened to get it removed. That, once again, is so similar to the risk that was presented to early peer-to-peer file sharing, in that if you're using that for a political purpose, it's extremely risky for this. And similarly, Secure Scuttlebutt, which is one of the like a rising star of the decentralized space, has its own issues, one in which the fragmentation and mirroring of independent data in a way that's not deletable creates this forensically sound way of tracking individuals as they communicate across networks. And the problem here, of course, is not just the fact that you can't redact anything properly in Secure Scuttlebutt, but also the fact itself that this is that the community itself is embracing a technically exhilarating but ultimately kind of scary piece of technology. Because today it might be safe. Today we are in a society that, for all intents and purposes, is still somewhat stable. There's a lot of privilege for a lot of people who operate in this space, myself included. But if we continue to ignore this, then we run into the problem of basically buying into the optimism that's come before us, and in doing so, we will not escape we won't escape this loop. And so, from the roles that cryptocurrencies play in emerging darknet markets to the well-funded efforts by IPFS to produce faster, safer internet, our communities in the decentralized space seek to antagonize a powerful status quo whilst making these trade-offs that don't acknowledge how societies directly threaten their communities. And I'm showing Steve Jobs here. This is a clip where he describes seeing the computer as a bicycle for the mind, because I think that this Californian ideology has kind of bled into how we all engage with the space. I know that there are people here who think that we don't. But the reality is that by striving for connectivity and striving to represent each other and ourselves in a sort of rationalist sense in the online space, we're actually taking components of the Californian ideology, and these, I think, have deep, deep flaws in them that, because we start from them as a basis, will ensure that that the dangers of the previous loops apply in loop number 4. And I want to finish this by just sort of saying that the instability we have today demands platform reform. We need new systems that understand the way in which the centralized platforms have failed in a variety of ways. You just need to look at the tragedy unfolding on the West Coast of the United States to see how much of it is powered by centralized systems. Centralized social media in particular. But our movement demands not another protocol or a manifesto, but a savvy understanding of these two issues, of reimagining identity and connectivity as debt, rather than striving for decentralized systems that seek to connect and seek to represent ourselves and each other. We need to, I think, start thinking about these things as threats at their core. And if we start to redesign and rethink some of the core basic assumptions that we have around what identity looks like. And when I say identity, I mean specifically an identity from a social construct and how that is represented online, not necessarily a cryptographic one. But regardless, we as protocol designers must discard the tools that have crushed divergence and nuance. Along with the Californian ideology, we need to discard design thinking, user personas, and this desire to produce ethical design practice. And instead, there's this rich but incomplete field of emergent work. Some of it we can draw from includes the civil rights movement in the 1970s that spilled over into the world of academia, in which UC Berkeley students pushed back against the digitization of their student records. There's also a lot of emergent work coming out of India and the United States around decolonizing privacy studies, which is something that I've had to very seriously look at and try to re-examine some of my assumptions around individual and community privacy. There's also, I think, more broadly, the decolonized design movement. And in doing so, we have to cede the space for decision-making and expertise to underrepresented and assailed communities. Because when I put the essay out 2 months ago, one of the criticisms I had was that there was no time or space to have these kinds of discussions, that privacy was expensive and not as important because the use cases weren't right. But we can't marvel any longer at the novel interactions afforded by peer-to-peer technologies. We must understand that without cohesive organization, we are stuck in this loop, and that any kind of cede of the commons by incumbent power will be they will push back with every single socio-technical flaw and every single design flaw in our systems. And the fallout and the trauma for this, I feel, will be far-reaching, way more than what we've seen so far in the past 3 loops. And if there's no collective reset, our movement will remain a historical novelty, a technological bauble and thought experiment for detached technologists who are unable to understand the political gravity of their tools. And because they'll be dismantled, the work will never withstand attacks against us. And then there'll be a loop 5. This is an awkward way of ending this. Originally, the talk is meant to be about 20 minutes with Q&A. So I apologize again for the fact that this is a bit of a technical problem. What I want to say, though, just as I finish, is that I'm interested in these discussions. I'm interested in really resetting this loop and preventing it from happening again. And I think if there's a larger discussion to be had that's beyond this one little half sort of flimsy, like shattered, I guess, video essay. So I thank you for your patience and thank you for coming. I will present or will provide the final copy of the video essay. And thank you very much for being here. If you want to find out more about the New Design Congress, you can visit us at newdesigncongress.org. Once again, this is not really something that I was meant to, didn't have anything prepared for a talk, so I appreciate it. And with that, if anyone wants to ask any questions in the chat, please do so. We only have a minute or so left. Thank you again for your time. I'm honored that you're here. And I'm very, very sorry that this has been a bit of a chaotic event.